When did the I crave attention kid go too far? My brother faked a mental breakdown to torch my shot at a filmmaking scholarship, so I dug up the truth and watched his perfect mask shatter. 4 years later, he's emailing me from a group home in Atlanta, asking if we can ever be brothers again. Growing up in Athens, Georgia, Nate was the golden boy, valedictorian, lacrosse star, the kid my parents paraded at every UGA tailgate. I was the scrawny younger sibling, 3 years behind, always lugging around a camcorder, trying to make short films that didn't suck. When I was 10, I'd sneak into Nate's room to watch his DVD. Wes Anderson, Tarantino, stuff I barely understood but thought was cool because he liked it. I'd beg him to watch my shaky iPhone videos, hoping he'd say I had potential. But Nate didn't want a fan, he wanted a punching bag. Every time I showed my family a clip at our Memorial Day cookout, he'd scoff, "Not bad. But I could direct circles around you if I cared about artsy crap." It wasn't just sibling rivalry. It was like he needed me to crash and burn so he could keep shining. The first time I gave up trying to impress him was after my 13th birthday. Mom got me a used Canon camcorder. Nothing fancy, but it was my ticket to making real films. I was buzzing, ran to Nate's room to show him. He was scrolling Instagram, barely glanced up and said, "Let's see what it can do." I handed it over, thinking he'd test the zoom or something. Instead, he tripped and dropped it onto the hardwood floor. The lens cracked, the screen went black. "My bad," he said, shrugging, already back on his phone. I stood there, heart in my throat, while my parents bought his clumsy act. That was the moment I learned to keep my dreams on lockdown. By 15, I was making short films for local contests, posting them on YouTube, even won a regional award for a documentary about Athens' music scene. R.E.M. Roots, local dive bars, that kind of thing. I kept it from Nate, but Dad couldn't resist bragging at our Sunday potlucks. Nate's jaw would clench, but he'd play it cool, saying, "Cute hobby, but you'll need a real job someday." I ignored him, focused on my big break. A full ride scholarship to NYU Tisch School of the Arts, contingent on a killer portfolio and interview. It was my shot to get out of Athens, maybe make it in Hollywood. I spent months editing, barely sleeping, my laptop humming late into the night. Nate got weirdly nice right before the interview. He offered to help me rehearse my pitch, said he wanted me to nail it. I was naive enough to buy it, thinking maybe college had mellowed him. The interview was virtual, a panel of Tisch professors on Zoom. I was ready, but halfway through, my phone started buzzing with texts from a random number. "You're a fraud. You'll bomb. Everyone knows your films are trash." My voice shook. I stumbled over answers I'd practiced 100 times. The professors' faces stayed blank. I tanked. Afterward, Nate was in the kitchen, eating leftover pizza, all casual. "Rough one, huh?" he said, not even looking up. I knew he was behind it, but I had no proof. But none of that compares to what he did the week before my NYU results came out. Watch the full video to see how far he really went.